But I've always thought, and I am a professional chemist, I think, and I have worked not only teaching but in industry, but I always found the more liberal arts, and maybe now it could be international studies or minority studies and so on. I always found those things were challenging to me. And I don't just use chemistry in life. I use all of these other things. So I'm not so sure that it's hurting it. We haven't had any pressure to cut back on the amount of chemistry that a student takes, and mathematics and physics, which you should have if you're going to be a chemistry major or a pre-med. So I don't think it's got to the place, at least at DePauw, where it's doing any harm. And I think the overall environment is enhanced by it. That's my opinion.
Mrs. Kemmer, what do you think on this? On the college, I can see it also in that a person's paying for that education. So if they want to take these classes that are offered, why not? They're paying for it. It's their money. But in the high school situation, do you see it differently, or do you see it similar to Dr. McFarland?
Well, I think one of the strengths of the American school system is that we do offer so many different courses. We're not just with the basics, period. And I think students do need that. Students who come in from overseas as exchange students often are really excited about what we offer in the curriculum. This, of course, is going to vary with different schools, because you always have to get the certain basic requirements done. If you have students who are preparing for college, they have to get those requirements in. But if they have time for electives, if you have a large enough staff that can offer those electives, then they really should be there. I think more and more we're going to see in the schools in Japan. I understand from my reading these days that the Japanese young person is getting a little bit antsy now.
Now you spent some time in Japan.
That's right. I taught 7.5 years in Japan. So I find it very amusing when I hear people get really uptight. Oh, the Japanese are so much better than American school system. They go to school 280 or 240 days a year to our 180. But I have to sort of chuckle at that, because I remember those days of going to school. And a lot of those days that we went to in school, we could arrive in the morning and the principal would say, gee, what a beautiful day today. Let's go have a school picnic today. So off we would go. Well, that still counted as part of the 240 days. So we sometimes chuckle about just how much is going on in that curriculum. And I do think you're going to see some changes in the Japanese school system.
Some changes in the
I think so, because they're beginning to look at American students and they think, that looks like a lot of fun. I wish we could do that too.
That's right. So, now, Dr. McFarland, you spent some time in England.
England
what do the
and
British have?
The Netherlands.
And the Netherlands.
But could I make a comment?
Please.
For example, at DePauw, you can't take more than 10 courses in your major unless you take more than 31. So most of our people take 8 courses. Now, compared with some schools where chemistry majors may take 15 courses. And we used to worry, are our students not ready for graduate school or ready to go to work in chemistry? But yet, the graduate schools will take any of our good students, and they find that they're just as good when they get there as the people who have had 15 courses. So that again argues for a liberal education.
Yeah, I was going to say, they'll say they're better because they do have that broad horizon.
They're not.
You brought up an interesting question there, Dr. McFarland.
And also, being in the Netherlands and also London, I found, especially in the Netherlands, the kids, I don't like to call them kids, but they, by my age, I suppose I can call you kids, would come to the university, like we have freshmen coming, and they were already into the laboratory doing research. They hardly took any courses. I thought to myself, now they must have missed something along the way. They are much ahead in the sciences, but somewhere along the line, they have missed something, I think. And I think, even though our system may have many bad parts about it, I think it's still pretty good. And if we can get people motivated somehow, our system's okay.
Now, I have a couple questions off of that.
Okay.
You raised an interesting point. America, United States, ranked first in the world in 2 areas. It wasn't math, it wasn't English, it wasn't science.
Driver's ed.
It was driver's ed, no. No, it was
Maybe
graduate school and art,
Ah.
creativity in art. It's interesting that you brought up the point about graduate school and that students are very prepared in the United States. The ones that go to graduate school are good, therefore the ranking. But there's also a number of foreigners who take part in our graduate schools too. There's a number of Japanese that go there too. Why is there this discrepancy? Why are we strong on the graduate level, but possibly missing a lot of people along the way? Dr. McFarland.
let me take the graduate. I will leave art to someone else. I think you mentioned the foreign students, and indeed there are. It depends on where they come from, of course, and I'm not going to say where. But I think that's only one thing that makes our graduate work. The immensity of the cash, I think, is very important. I doubt very much if any countries, including the Japan, and, well, I think I read somewhere that Japan spends less money.
About 50%,
in Germany,
in fact.
50%.
Per student.
But I think we put a lot of money into graduate work. In science, for example, the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, you're thinking about multi-million dollars, and you can just outdo them by numbers, I think. And you have much more money nowadays, you buy instruments in the sciences, you're thinking about $1 million per instrument, and some countries just can't afford that. At least they don't afford it. I think that's one reason. It is true that that our graduate schools in science and engineering are getting to the point where there are almost as many non-U.S. citizens as we have U.S. citizens. And if they are from certain parts of the earth, they are very good. The Asians, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese are quite good, and they are helping. But there is another problem, which you may and may not want to get into. That's called the crisis in science, because in engineering schools nowadays, 50% of the students in the graduate schools are non-U.S. citizens. 50% roughly of the faculty are non-U.S. citizens. And it's getting that way in physics, in chemistry, especially in the physical sciences.
I heard a fact, I'm not sure if it is exactly on par, but I heard that of all the people that graduated with engineering degrees in Indiana, only 3 went into teaching. Is there a lack? Are we lacking in this area? You mentioned about the problem with science education in our schools. Would you like to?
Well, then I'll quit talking after this. I did do a study, and in the physical sciences, such as chemistry and physics particularly, and in engineering, it is predicted over the next decade that there will be twice as many teachers retiring, just retiring, than there will be new, especially of the PhD level, where you almost have to have now to teach in college. So if that is true, either the graduate schools will go down, or we'll have more and more non-U.S. citizens teaching. And if they are good, that's okay. But what will happen if the schools, countries which are now not as developed as we are, become more developed and the people go home? We will really have a crisis in this country, especially in the sciences and mathematics.
Mrs. Kemmer, why aren't people going into education?
Okay, and they're not going into education. Number one, who respects a teacher anymore? Who's low on the list of what do you want to be? They certainly are not going to say teaching. We have no support on that. Having taught both in Japan and in Africa, where teachers are a highly respected citizen of the community, and then to come into the school system in America and find out, you know, your students saying to you, well, who are you? My dad says teachers don't know anything, and so forth. We don't or are not treated as a really important person in the system anymore. Second thing, and I don't usually talk about money because I never went into teaching for a salary, but in our society today, the young people only see dollars, and they know that teachers are not receiving that. Don't you find it strange that teachers have to go out on strike to get a contract to keep a school going all the time? I think there's something wrong in our society when that's what we have there. Until teachers are brought up, till they are given the true perspective where they have complete support from parents at home, you will not have a good school system. Japan is a good school system, not because of its curriculum, not because of its school building. We can go way beyond that in America. But the fact that in Japan, every parent is concerned about their student. And no child, number one, works. He goes to school, period. He doesn't have a job at McDonald's. He doesn't have a part-time job on the weekends. He isn't concerned about gas for his car. He goes to school. He's a student. And it's just assumed that at this age of your life, you are studying.
How can teachers get this respect back?
It's going to have to come from society, from parents.
From parents?
I think so.
Do you believe in national standards, Dr. McFarland, for teachers? It's been brought up that exams on the professors and teachers themselves will help weed out the good from the bad and perhaps bring greater confidence in our teachers and professors and possibly bring the respect back to the profession.
I believe in standards, but I always worry about who's going to set the standards. Just like in one school, for example, a university, we have standards for evaluating teachers and all that sort of thing. But then who sets the standards? It's often people who are not on the job. I would be happy with standards for education in general if you get more people who are really teaching, setting the teaching standards. But I'm a little leery of that. I think, and I don't know how to do this, but the kind of people that should be in teaching is what the kind that want to teach because they chose teaching, not because they couldn't get another job. And how you bring this about, I'm not sure. I didn't have to teach. I was a research chemist, but I may not be the best teacher in the world, but I teach because I want to teach, and I imagine you do too. We could do other things. And until we can somehow attract people who want to teach and interested in the student, any national standards are going to fall flat on their face every time, I think.
What do you think, Mrs. Kemmer, on that?
I was thinking about a cup that sits on my desk at school that says, you know, there's always been that expression, if you can't do something, then be a teacher. And my cup indicates I am a teacher, and it was too bad that, I can't remember how it says it now that I brought it up. The idea being that there isn't anything else anyone else could do. If you can't do it, you certainly are not going to go into teaching. But I think the lack of understanding between parents and teachers and the students, the respect, it's just not there.
And it's getting worse.
It's getting worse.
I'd like to tell a little story if you have time.
Go ahead.
I was in the Netherlands for more than a year, and interesting thing happened. Something happened that I didn't want to happen. I got a kidney stone. So I had to go into the university hospital, and they had a nursing school there also. And they never did do anything with me, but I was in the room. And the young nurses were coming in all the time. About every 30 minutes, they would bring in a glass of juice. And when my friend came, I didn't go to the door, but when my friend came to visit me, I said, why are these people so nice? He said, well, you didn't see what was on the outside of the door. It said, Professor McFarland.